to more news. The United Nations has announced that its aid agency, UNRWA, would continue working in all Palestinian territories, including the occupied East Jerusalem, even as Israel cuts ties with the organization. We have more details in this report. The United Nations Palestinian Relief Agency said its humanitarian work across the occupied territories in Gaza was still ongoing despite an Israeli ban that took effect a day before and what it described as hostility towards its staff. An Israeli law adopted in October bans operations by UNRWA on Israeli land, including the annexed East Jerusalem, and contact with Israeli authorities from January 30th. Britain, France and Germany on Friday reiterated their concern over Israel implementing the new law, which humanitarian agencies say will have a huge impact on devastated Gaza as staff and supplies transit to the Palestinian enclave via Israel. Director of Communications of UNRWA, Juliet Thoma, told a press briefing in Geneva that the agency continues to provide services. She said any disruptions to its work in Gaza would put a ceasefire deal that halted the war between Israel and Hamas at risk. Tens of thousands of Palestinian refugees in occupied East Jerusalem, whose annexation by Israel is not recognized internationally, also receive education, healthcare and other services from UNRWA. UNRWA said that its Palestinian staff in the West Bank and East Jerusalem were facing difficulties, citing examples of stone throwing and hold-ups at checkpoints and protests at its sites, blaming Israeli extremists. Before the agreement, experts had warned of imminent famine in parts of North Gaza. Supplies have since risen, and the World Food Programme said more than 32,000 tons of food had entered Gaza since the January 19th deal took effect. At the same briefing, the World Health Organization's Dr. Iriqat said about 12,000 to 14,000 patients were waiting to be evacuated from Gaza across the Rafah crossing. 50 are said to be moved on Saturday amid warnings that some children could die. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest, Dr. Dalal, Iriqat, Professor of Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution. Doctor, it's a very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Hello?
Hello.
Good afternoon to you, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right. Doctor, let me ask you today, the United Nations has announced that its aid agency, UNRWA, will continue working in all the Palestinian territories, including the occupied East Jerusalem, even as Israel cuts ties with the organization. How do you see this announcement, Doctor?
Well, it's a resort back to international law, a resort and respect to the international world order, and a message to Israel that all their actions in odds and in violations of the international world order and international law cannot just continue. However, this is also a message to the world that UNRWA per se was established because of the sufferings and the endurances of the Palestinian people because of the Israeli military occupation.
Yes.
So UNRWA was the result of the Israeli military, not the cause for it. And this has to do with the Palestinian refugee file as well. So as long as the Palestinian refugees file and issue and cause is not solved, it's not finally solved, then the UNRWA is the legally binding organization that needs to support the Palestinian refugees with all the different services, aid, education, health, and other matters. It's a great message by the UN and by the international order to Israel, which has been acting like a pariah state, a state that has been violating everything that has to do with the international humanitarian law, for Geneva Conventions, UN. Actually, Israel did insult the UN system so many times in attacking not only UNRWA, but all the different international organizations while they were committing a documented genocide. And now Israel is facing a case of plausibility of genocide at the ICJ. Yet they continue to try to insult and act above all world order. So respect to the UN for taking a stance of a position of dignity and respect to the world order of system that Israel needs to respect, and Israel needs to remember that the mere recognition and the mere character that it enjoyed for the past 77 years actually came from the United Nations.
Absolutely. On that note, I'd like to thank you very, very much, Dr. Dalal, Iriqat, Professor of Diplomacy and Conflict Resolution. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time and your insight.